Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's health and safety focused webinar. So before we start, we just want to introduce ourselves. Our presenter today is Dom Greenwood, our Senior Health and Safety Environmental Management Consultant. I'm Victoria Templeton and will be supporting this webinar in the background, and I will field any questions that you may have to Dom at the end of the webinar. And we also have a team who will be on hand to assist with any technical issues. Please note that there are lots of you today who have joined us, so for obvious reasons you are all automatically on mute. But that said, we do want to hear your questions and we encourage questions, so please do let us know of any as we go throughout the webinar. And we'll be taking the questions at the end of the webinar, so you can make a note of your questions via the GoToWebinar panel that should look something like this. Please type your question in the questions pane and we will aim to read out and answer as many as we can. If we run out of time, then we will be sure to follow up separately afterwards. And as usual, we want to make this session as interactive as we would normally at our physical events. So we will be running several polls throughout the session as well. And when we have a poll, it will appear on your screen and you just select the answer that is appropriate for you. Please note though, to be able to participate in the polls, you will need to ensure your screen is not in full screen mode. As for some reason, only known to GoToWebinar, it doesn't actually work in the full screen mode. So I'm now going to hand over to Dom, who will take you through today's health and safety webinar. There we go. And over to you, Dom.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. And firstly, just to say thank you for joining this webinar today, and hope you enjoy it. And this is the kind of third one we've done since I joined the company, and I'm hoping, Victoria, you can confirm that that's moved.
Yes, it's moved. Yes.
Fantastic. So I'm just going to quickly run through the agenda and some of the things we're going to talk about today. And I really wanted to talk about the general perception around health and safety, and I think it's often been given quite a negative and adverse perception over the years, and there's a very typical and stereotypical view of a health and safety person, which I'd like to think isn't me. And we're going to broach that. We're going to think about why we manage health and safety, do a little bit again on the law and regulations, and then just really consequences to you and maybe your business should you not be managing health and safety correctly, and then what tools that you can use, what can you do as an employer, and maybe how we can help you with some of that as well. So why do we manage health and safety? Because surely it's easier not to. Well, I think we've only got to look at the perception of just how much there is to do in health and safety, whether it's documents, check sheets, training, and all the rest of it. Surely that would be easier just to say, well, actually, we're not going to bother doing any of that, and we're going to concentrate on sales, customer service, product development, R&D, or whatever that might be. But as we all know, there are ramifications and consequences should we not do that. And I think it's important to think of, I'd like you all actually to think of over the next, say, maybe 10 or 20 seconds, is what do you think of when you hear the words health and safety? You know, what comes into your mind? What do you actually think of, and is there a perception of what that might be? And I've been teaching level 2, level 3 health and safety for about 4 or 5 years, and I run this as an exercise as part of the training, and it's really interesting to see what comes back from people. So I'm going to give you another 10 seconds. I'm not going to get you to feedback live, but I'm hoping some of the things that I'm going to flash up shortly will be what you've just thought of. So what do you think of when you hear the words health and safety? And the first thing I'm going to put there is it's boring. I get that quite a lot. It's boring. Why do we bother doing it? And there's quite a nice little icon there of health and safety is boring. And I mean, I don't feel that way. It's what I do for a job role. But I think you can make it as boring or as bring it to life as much as you like. There's too much to do. We've got far too much to do already. Why are we doing health and safety things? Surely we need to focus our time on other stuff that's making the company money. And that's quite a short-sighted approach to health and safety, when if you get in trouble, the consequences and fines and things like that could cost you more money than you're going to actually bring in So a big part of it is that people find it boring and there's too much to do. There's needless red tape. You know, I often hear people say, well, you know, we can't even change a light bulb without getting a risk assessment out or doing an assessment on the ladder or training a person. Yep, I get that, and sometimes there is that response, but needless, not quite sure I agree, but there's a certain amount of red tape involved, and again, I think that icon is quite poignant with the owner or the manager being kind of red taped up against the wall because he can't do anything. Obviously, there's a response around policies and procedures. And again, companies can go as far as they like with policies and procedures. I, in my role and in previous roles, see some amazing policies and procedures. But guess what? Nobody else in the organisation knows anything about them because they're in a folder, pristine and look really good, but they're not trained in, and they're not brought to life in the working environment. So policies and procedures are important, and people often think of that when they hear the words health and safety mentioned. PPE, obviously at the moment we're all embroiled in the PPE world. We're in the middle of pandemic and lockdown 2.0. So PPE is much more on our radars than it probably was 6 to 9 months ago. But again, people often think about PPE, and obviously depending on what industry you're in, it depends on what PPE you may or may not be using, from hard hats to goggles to hearing defenders to sight protectors, gloves, gauntlets, and everything in between. There's loads of rules and regs. Again, on the courses I'm running, I'm always getting, there's too many rules and regs, I can't do anything. It's not like it was years ago, and that kind of stuff. Well, interestingly, there was only around 140 workplace deaths over the last couple of years. That's changed dramatically since the 80s and the 90s, where there was in excess of 500, 600 occupational deaths. So the fact that we've got rules and regulations is safeguarding us all at work. The HSE, our health and safety executive. Some people think of that, and I'm not sure whether people have ever been on the HSE website or have used them for any guidance or any documents, but it is a great resource and is far, far better than it was a few years ago. There's so many different guides on there that you can now download for free that were previously paid for. My view would be that as a responsible company, health and safety manager, owner, director, that you would want to be downloading those and showing them to your staff. The dreaded risk assessments people talk about, and again, this is part of the regulations, and come the change of regulations in 1992, the risk assessments were brought in, and we've all seen them and probably used them in the past. But again, people think that there's numerous risk assessments, and do they really need them? Are they really usable? My response to that would be, make them specific to your company, make them task-based, activity-based, people-based, and involve the staff with them so that they know what they should and shouldn't be doing. So workplace risk assessments, important. People often mention to me about fines, and again, we all hear through the media just how many prosecutions there are that the health and safety executive are prosecuting, whether it be through fire or occupational safety. And we're going to talk a bit later in the presentation about how that has changed over the last 3 or 4 years with the birth of the new sentencing guidelines that came into force in and around 2016 and have been reviewed since. Which leads me on to the next point, which, and again, quite a regular topic I get asked about is, could I go to court? Could I go to jail? And obviously the answer is yes, as we know about. Training, often hear people say about training, there's so much training to do with health and safety. I don't know what course to go on. What do I need to do? Well, there's a number of training sessions that you can attend, whether it be through nationally recognised awarding body training, through to webinars like today, through to online training, through to just finding that information for yourself, and running maybe toolbox talks with your company. So training is important. Accidents, I think a lot of people think of accidents when they think of health and safety, and just what that can entail, from somebody cutting themselves, slips, trips and falls from height, or something far more serious which could be life-changing to somebody and or be a fatality in the workplace, all of which we need to think about investigating in the workplace, and also think about maybe talking to RIDDOR, which is the regulation for reporting of accidents to the health and safety executive. And as we see on that picture there, there's a looks like a serious fall from height on a construction site. So they're just a number of different things that I get asked about, and we talk about on the health and safety course, that people think about when those dreaded words health and safety come up. I'm hoping that some of those were what you guys were thinking about as well. And if there isn't, it'd be great to hear what you thought of too. We're going to run our first poll, so I'm going to hand back
Brilliant.
to
Thank you.
Yep, if you'd like to take back over, Victoria.
Right.
Sorry.
It's okay. So I'm going to run the first poll for everybody, and the question is, do you feel that health and safety is taken seriously in your workplace? So I'm going to launch the poll now, and you'll see it on the screen. I'll give you a few moments. Okay, we've got a few more left to vote. So do you feel that health and safety is taken seriously in your organisation? Okay. So I'm going to close the poll, and I'm going to share the results. So Dom, the polls are showing that 73% do feel that health and safety is taken seriously, but unfortunately 27% don't. So I don't know if you have any comments on that.
I suppose, yes, I do. So it is positive that 73% of our listener base do feel that it's taken seriously, which is great, and obviously unfortunate that 27% don't. And obviously what we don't know is to what level they don't feel that it's taken seriously. My view would be that people should and listeners should have the ability to go back to their workplaces and talk to whoever might be the site safety manager, ops director, and just sort of maybe talk more about this kind of stuff. And you know, maybe when this presentation is made available, that they can actually organise some sort of training event so that it is taken more seriously. And again, more than happy to talk to people about that.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so I'm going to hide that poll, and I think over to you now, then yeah.
Can you see that moving again?
Yes, brilliant. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so it brings me on to why do we manage health and safety, and there is a number of reasons. The overarching and most important reason is that it is the law. We don't have a choice. It's much the same as if you're driving a car without MOT, tax or insurance. It is a criminal offence not to manage health and safety. And the two regulations that the two legislations we're going to think about is the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 and the Fire Safety Reform Order in 2005. They're the two overarching pieces of legislation that are widely documented online, and it would be my advice to make sure that you're abiding by those. Surely you'd want to work for a company which has got a good reputation, and you'd want your company to be reputable in its local area and in its industry. So a major reason why we'd want to manage health and safety would be to improve reputation in the company. Obviously, it speaks for itself that we want to minimise risks to people, and when I'm talking about people, that could be workers, people that actually work in the building for the company, they're on payroll. However, under Section 3 of the Health and Safety at Work Act, it also talks and documents other people, non-employees, and that could be anybody from a self-employed person to a contractor to a member if you're selling memberships for maybe a fitness facility. If you've got a shop or running a cinema, for instance, and just general visitors if you're running an open day and inviting people in to look around your facility. Would also include children, should they come in with mums and dads or visitors, and also guests, should you be running accommodation facilities. So what we want is to minimise the risk to people, so a major reason why we manage health and safety would be for that. There is massive correlation between productivity of staff and the way they feel in the workplace. and safety is one of those factors. So there's a couple of studies that have been done. They're available online, and we can probably get a link up to those as well. That shows the productivity increase in staff and workers should they feel in a clean, safe, and welcoming environment. It could be that you would win more business. It could be that if you are known in your industry for not being particularly safe, not being particularly professional, that you may not win as much business. So surely you'd want to be the company that are safe and all the staff are happy to work there and they're talking about what you're doing, and you've got a great culture. So win more business. So there's a legal, moral, and financial aspect to why we want to manage health and safety, and it's also worthy of note to think about. I mean, my background for the last 10 years before coming to HR Solutions was working for Europe's largest fitness franchise, and we would regularly have funding partners come into the office, and quite often they would ask, what is the accident profile like of that franchisee? Have they had any insurance claims? And that can now correlate with how much money or funding is available. So it's worth thinking about the financial view of a negative health and safety culture, and also obviously the potential notices that a health and safety advisor, enforcement officer can give should they find that you're not managing health and safety correctly. I alluded to it earlier in the presentation, but the two overarching laws in the UK would be the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 and also the Fire Safety Reform Order 2005. And underneath both of those major pieces of legislation, there are a number of regulations that we physically haven't got time to go through today, but would really advise everybody to think about whether your workplace is abiding by both of those pieces of primary legislation in the UK. And it brings me on to a slide that I actually used in the last presentation and use quite regularly on our training courses. But thinking about what is a competent person, and under both regulations in the UK, they want you to and are asking you to appoint one or a number of competent people. And a competent person would be someone who has sufficient training, qualifications, knowledge and experience, and other qualities that allow them to assist the responsible person with health and safety matters. So the responsible person would be seen as the business owner, and it could be that that's a chief executive. Potentially it's the highest ranking officer, it could be a managing director, it could be the business owner. And what normally would happen is they would generally ask for a member of staff, whether it be a site safety manager, operations manager, or the like, to become a competent person and oversee the health and safety requirements of that business. And that, to be fair, is a responsible position. It's a legally binding position, and I think you need to think about whether you've received the correct training. Do you have the qualifications? And training doesn't have to be qualifications, as we talked about earlier. It could be work-based training, it could be site-specific training, and certainly if you're in an industry where there's different machines, it could be construction, it could be agriculture, there may not be a qualification that would fit that, so it may be in industry-specific training. What I would say is get it signed off and make sure that it would deem you competent to look at the health and safety requirements of that business. Knowledge is a massive part, as is experience, and sometimes experience is the best of all, because if someone's been doing a particular job or been in a company for a number of years, they have probably encountered the vast majority of things that can go wrong, and also understand the solutions for them. So the real reason for this slide and that first paragraph would be to think about whether, if that's you, do you feel you're sufficiently trained, have the right qualifications, knowledge and experience? And if you're a business owner, manager, director, is your competent person the right person to be understanding the health and safety matters? The level of competence required will depend on the complexity of the situation, obviously, and the particular needs of that organisation. So if we think about maybe a standard office setup, so maybe a nuclear power plant or a chemical plant, you can quite clearly see the differences between what's required for that health and safety competent person. And proof of competence may be needed to be demonstrated and verified by a regulator or an enforcement officer in the event of an accident, incident, allegation or legal proceeding. So I think it's worth thinking about, should you be asked to prove the competence of the competent person, can you do that? Have you got training declarations signed? Have you got qualifications and certificates available? Have you got method statements and things like that should you be asked. If you're asking your competent person to complete things like your fire risk assessment and or general risk assessments, or say systems of work, and it fails, can you then prove that they've had the right and enough training, supervision, qualifications, knowledge and experience? So there's a bit to think about with regards to the competent person. I'm going to pass back to Victoria for our second poll.
Brilliant, thank you. And so our next question for the poll is, do you have a nominated competent person in health, safety and fire? So let's launch this poll. Okay, so we're collecting the responses. Leave it a few more moments. Okay, let's bring this to a close and share the results. So Dom, we have 69% say they do have a nominated competent person and 31% say they don't.
Okay, thank you for that, and thank you to everybody for being honest and taking part in that poll. It comes as no surprise me that those numbers are not higher for the in the yes bracket. 69% of you have said you've got a trained, qualified, knowledgeable and experienced competent person, which is great, but I would absolutely urge the 31% of you that haven't to think about who that might be and what could happen should you be asked to verify who that is. More than that, should there be an accident or an incident, that would be probably one of the first questions you would be asked. Who is the competent person for the site? And it may be that you're thinking that it's the owner or it's the owner or one of the directors, but they don't come to the site. It may be that the owner or the director is thinking that it's somebody at the site that's doing it, and it often boils down to miscommunication with who's actually doing the job and who's putting the things in place. So certainly if risk assessments, fire risk assessment, method statements, safe systems of work check sheets, COSH, RIDDOR, things like that are being looked after by somebody, it may be that they are the competent person but just don't realise they are, but it also may be that you need to think about some training and or making it a little bit more official should anything happen. And again, I'm more than happy to have a conversation with anybody after this or later in the week next week.
Okay, thank you.
We've actually gone straight to another poll.
Brilliant.
I believe, and I'm just going to. So question 3 would be, do you feel you need support in managing health and safety? And I'll hand back to Victoria to
Brilliant
for that one.
Yeah, so I have opened the poll. So do you feel you need support with managing health and safety? Yes or no? Just wait a few more moments. And we'll bring it to a close. Let's see what the answers are and share the responses. So we have yes at 80% and no at 20%.
Okay, that's great. So this one's obviously been the most successful poll that we actually know. Do you feel you need support in managing health and safety? So I've got it the wrong way. So yes, 80% of you do feel you need some support and 20% don't. So yeah, and that could be support. That could be professional support in the same way that we offer as a business. However, that could also be support from your managers, directors, and people and staff at site level. So it's difficult to understand exactly what support you may be requiring. My view again would be to try and document that down to find out what maybe you need support on, and really try and escalate that up to a senior leadership team or a senior manager. And again, it's worth thinking about the industry that you're working in. If there are specific health and safety risks or factors, as we've already talked about, construction, industry, manufacturing, warehousing, agriculture, whatever it might be, then your factors may be different to somebody else's. So again, more than happy to be involved with that, but I think it's it's quite a high percentage. So I think that needs to be looked into. So please go back and see if you can get that support that you feel you need.
Okay, thank you, Dom, and I'm hitting that poll now. So over to you again for the rest of the webinar.
Thank you. So we're just going to sort of look at what the consequences could be of kind of not managing health and safety. And as we've already talked about, it's not really a choice. And I think it's been misconcepted by people that it is a choice, and it's kind of the last thing you'll do. And or we might do the health and safety stuff as and when we've done the sales and we've done the customer service, and we've got the new product right, and we've got those orders in and things like that. But really, it needs to be at the forefront of everything that we do in the workplace, and needs to be in every management meeting, staff meeting, needs to be given equal billing as everything else. There's legal ramifications. We touched on it earlier, and there are fines and custodial sentences should you be seen as negligible or negligent in the world of health and safety. And the health and safety executive now don't need a reason to prosecute. You'll be surprised to hear if there's just a mere risk factor in the business, they can still prosecute, and we're going to come on to that shortly. Just think about the different claims for compensation that not only could a worker try and claim, but also maybe a member of the public, a contractor, a visitor, a guest. There's so many people that could be coming into your facilities, depending on what you run. And compensation obviously is going to not only hit your bottom line, but also the negative PR. It could affect your insurance premiums. As I said earlier, my history has been in the leisure industry, fitness industry, and quite regularly met with insurance companies to talk about premiums for fitness clubs, leisure centres, outward bound centres, sports centres, and quite often the questions around accidents, insurance claims would come up, and if we'd had one, it was a difficult conversation because the insurance premiums can obviously go up, and that can affect income and revenue. Again, we touched on it earlier, the correlation between productivity of the staff, but also profitability. Consequences of not managing health and safety could have a knock-on effect for both the staff that don't feel that they're supported, they don't feel they're working in a particularly safe environment, so the turnover of staff could be higher, but also the profitability of the business. And again, we're in difficult times at the moment with a national lockdown, uncertainty about the future next year. You don't want that any further constraints on income revenue from claims or fines. Staff can feel unmotivated to do what they want to do. You may start seeing the sickness trend go up as well, because staff don't feel that they're supported, but also don't feel safe in the workplace. So that's also a consequence of not managing health and safety. Your reputation is key. It's the biggest calling card you can put out there to your company, whether you be a sales company, a product company, whatever you're doing. You need to have good reputation, not only in your local area, but also in your industry. If it starts to get round that you're having industrial accidents, occupational hazards, maybe a couple of claims go against you, things on social media, whatever it might be, you could find that you've got irreversible reputational damage, and that could then affect the longevity of the company, but also of what you're actually doing there. Again, I touched on it earlier, funding issues. It depends how you're funded, and every company is funded differently, whether it be through a partnership, whether it be through a consortium, or whether it just be individually owned. Should you then wish to go and gain additional funding for projects, maybe for development, maybe for other sites, you may find that may not happen, or you may have to pay a really high APR because you've got a bad history of accident profile and that kind of stuff. Brings me on to accidents in general. You just don't want to be having accidents at work. Every workplace will have accidents. But you just don't want the big accidents to happen. You don't want the health and safety executive to be doing investigations and or your local EHO, because unfortunately when they do come in and they're investigating one accident or incident, they will not just stay in the area where that accident or incident has happened. They'll probably look everywhere, talk to staff, they'll want to look through your documents, and sooner rather than later it can all snowball. So if you've got your house in order, that won't happen, but an innocent accident or an accident that's been whistleblown to the local authority or the health and safety executive can often lead to something far more serious. And again, staff turnover. Talked earlier in the presentation about the correlation between the way staff feel and their productivity. And again, should they feel that they're not supported, acknowledged, or they're not working in a safe environment, you may find that the staff leave. And that brings its own challenges, because you've then got to train new staff. You've then got to induct new staff. They've then got to become in the business. They need to understand what they're doing, and obviously the staff that have left can then move to maybe a competitor and or talk to other people and speak negatively about the business. So staff turnover can be effective as well. And the last point really on this slide is just poor PR. Unfortunately, we're living in a world now where it's very transparent with social media, all the different platforms there are, whether it be LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and all the others. People have got the ability to take photographs far sooner and far quicker than ever before on phones. And what we don't want is the an accident, an incident, or general negative PR on social media. And again, once it's on there, it's very difficult to get it off, as we all know. I was working for a leisure trust that will remain nameless, that had an inspection a few years ago now, and there was the ability to have Legionella in the water system. Didn't have Legionella in the water system, it just had the ability to breed because of the temperatures that the water system was run at. And the following week, it was on the front page of the paper, killer bug. And guess what? It was all over social media very quickly, and PR had to spring into action. The reason I'm telling the story is the ramifications and the consequences on the income was massive. I think it took about a year for that whole situation to blow over, because people were talking about it. Memberships were cancelled. People decided not to go and use our competitors, and just the reputation in the local area. And it just was people talk. So poor PR has got a massive knock-on effect to your company for a number of different reasons. Brings me on to new sentencing guidelines, and I did allude to this earlier in the presentation, in that they are now based on your company's turnover. 2016, these changed, and I was lucky enough to be on a seminar where all of this was kind of released to the health and safety world, and there was a big gasp around the room when this happened, because I think people realised this is going to be huge, and for the bigger companies out there, the fines are going to be massive. Don't think that because if you're working for a small company and you don't turn over too much, you'll get away with it, because you won't. But it's interesting, and what I've done is put some stats together here for you. So the Health and Safety Work Act came out in 1974. So if we look at the period between 1975 and when the new sentencing guidelines came in, there were 32 £1 million fines, with an average of 1.8 million. Yet in the 4 years of the new sentencing guidelines being in place, there were already 41 £1 million fines. So that's been superseded in 4 years, opposed to 40 years, if that makes sense. And interestingly, 50-50 split on fatal versus non-fatal. So back in the day, somebody pretty much had to die at the workplace or have life-changing injuries for a £1 million fine to be given down. Now it's a 50-50 split, so it's interesting to think of that. If we look at custodial sentences in the same way, in the 40 years between the Health and Safety Work Act and the new sentencing guidelines coming out, around 189 custodial sentences, and already in that short period, 30 custodial sentences. So if you do the maths, 30, you're talking at least 10 a year. So it's going to be around 4 times the amount. The average conviction time has increased to 4 years from January 16. Interestingly, the new sentencing guidelines were reviewed in 2017 and 2018, I believe. So, and again, they're available online, and I can probably get a link out to people. It is really interesting because you can quite clearly see where your company will fall. There's 4 different bandings, from large to micro companies, and I think a large company has to turn over around £10 million a year. And a micro company is anything less than $1 million. So that brings a lot of different companies into play. It will also look at the risk factors of the company and the mitigation, which is exactly what a judge or jury would look at. And you can work out the harm categories of where you think you're going to be. So you could quite clearly see, should we have an accident, where we may fall, should we be prosecuted. If we look at the tier under the £1 million fines, there were 14 500k fines in 15-16, 38 500k fines in 16-17, and interestingly, the health and safety executive have got a 93% successful conviction rate. So I think that's really important as well. The health and safety executive have got every resource available to them, and they hold more power than the police. So should they wish to come onto your site and remove folders, talk to staff, close the site down, obviously they can do that. They could issue a prohibition or an enforcement notice. The difference between those would be one of those will allow you to continue working with a list of suggested recommendations. The other will mean you close from that point, and you're not allowed to come back to the site until they have deemed you responsible and all the recommendations have been put in place. And the health and safety executive can bring about a prosecution if an accident hasn't happened, only the potential of risk or harm needs to be present. There's two tests the health and safety executive have to fulfill. It's the evidential test to make sure that there is enough evidence there, and a practical test. It will then be over to you to then decide whether you feel that is right, and you've got the evidence to suggest it isn't. And then the health and safety executive would then decide whether they want to undertake a prosecution. And again, I've got more information on this should people be interested, but I think it's interesting, the new sentencing guidelines. You've only got to look at things like the Merlin Entertainment Smiler Ride with the massive fine they had, down to the couple that unfortunately set up the bouncy castle a couple of years ago, and the young child that died in North Norfolk. Massive fines for both and custodial sentences. So happy to talk to anybody offline about that and give over any other information. But it is very interesting, and I think it's worthy of note that if you don't manage health and safety properly, this kind of stuff could happen. So what can you do? What kind of stuff can you do? Well, obviously the presentation is heavily geared around workplace, so appoint a competent person in not only fire but safety, and think about what does competent mean and how could you evidence that should you need to. Develop a health and safety policy statement. So have you actually got a health and safety policy statement that commits the company to what you're going to do under the legal requirements of both those acts? In my view, it would be a staff-facing document that any member of staff could go up to that and look at the 10, 12, 14, 20 points that you've done, and it should really cover training, risk management, and all the like. And again, can help with that. There's a number available. Have you got a health and safety management system? And this could be anything from a series of folders which are divided back into fire, safety, accidents, training, and/or a digital solution where you could build risk assessments and check sheets and things like that. So there's no right or wrong way of doing this, as long as you've got something and it's robust. So again, I see loads and loads of amazing documents, policies and procedures in pristine files that nobody's ever seen because they've been completed and done and then put on a shelf for the next year. So make sure that people actually know about them, test the system, and make sure it's robust. Have you reviewed all of your statutory compliance? And on the previous webinar a few weeks ago, we talked about the kind of 14, 15 different points under statutory compliance, from the fire risk assessment to insurance to appointing a competent person to risk assessments to checking electrical systems, fire alarm, emergency lighting, gas safe, and the list goes on. Again, on HR Solutions website, there's a drop down. There's a link to a statutory compliance assessment, which would be great if everybody could do that, because then you would then understand if you've got it in place and/or if you need anything to be done. You may be working in an industry where you need to have what we call permits, tickets, or certificates. So if you're transferring waste maybe to a waste management centre, you would need a permit or a certificate. If you need different tickets or certificates for various machines, depending on what you've got, make sure they're in place, make sure they've been reviewed and you've got exactly what you need. Have you taken risk assessments for all the different tasks and activities that are going on in your facility, workplace and/or sites, depending on what you're doing? So think about the activities that are taking place there, the processes that are taking place there. And my view would be the templated risk assessments are great that you can get online, but just make sure they reflect and are specific for your particular workplace, because again, I see some great risk assessments, but they're not particularly specific, and nobody's really read them properly and have not been reviewed. Train staff not only in all safety measures, which could include emergency procedures and their role, but also involve them in this process, because they need to feel involved in it, but they also need to know what they're supposed to be doing, and develop a safe system of work. And a safe system of work you may know of, you may have called it a RAM, a risk assessment method statement. So for any risk assessment that you've developed, there really should be a method statement or a system of work behind it that would then show the user how to actually undertake that role on a safe basis, and somewhere they can go back and refer to if you as the competent person are not around. Think about the culture. Are you displaying a positive view on health and safety from a senior leadership team level, a board level? Is it talked about in managers' meetings? Is it talked about in board meetings? Is there an area where staff can go and look at health and safety statements, accident analysis? Are there posters on fire safety, workplace hazards, and all the rest of it? Is there a newsletter that goes around? Are there webinars staff can go on? Are you doing toolbox talks? So the culture in the organisation around health and safety would be massive, and if that doesn't change from the top, then the guys doing the jobs and actually the workers won't embrace that either. Have you got the correct emergency procedures in place? An emergency action plan that would cover anything from fire to flooding to electrical faults to terrorism to violence at work, and everything in between. And again, we can help with that, but think about what could go wrong in your premises and how you would get people out should that happen. Are you investigating accidents and incidents and near misses, or are they just happening and no one's actually saying anything because they don't feel they can? Have you got the right forms to go with those? Accident report form, incident report form, near miss form. And then what happens to those forms as and when they're completed? Do they go up to a site safety manager who then reviews them, or do they just get put in a folder and again put back on the shelf? Are they talked about in management meetings and directors meetings, board meetings? Because these are the three categories that could really hurt you should there be an accident or incident and the health and safety executive come in and it goes the wrong way. Think about the equipment, chemicals, processes and people. So what are you actually doing at the site? What equipment have you got? When does it need to be serviced? Is it maintained properly? Do staff know what they're doing? Do the workers know how to use it? If you're running chemicals, are they stored correctly? Have they got risk assessments, cost assessments? Are they on a coma list? Could they explode? Are they flammable? What processes do you have? Are they reviewed on an annual basis, or are they still the same from 4, 5, 6, 10 years ago when somebody left and nobody really did it? And what people have you got there? Are they trained? Are they competent? And do they know what they're doing with regards to their job role? And I think the last point there is see it as a positive thing. There's a lot to do. We've just brought up 12 or 13 previous points. The very first slide we talked about with the perception of health and safety. This is probably why people think, oh, crikey, you know, I'll put it off, I'll put it off, I'll put it off. See it as a positive thing. Maybe get people together. Maybe get a working group. Maybe see it as positive and have some fun with it, because it doesn't have to be negative. It can be a positive team building and positive culture event. So
right, we have some questions for you, Dom.
Okay.
So thank you to everybody who submitted some questions. We've got quite a few that have come in. So the first one is around the competent person, and
Okay.
can we agree to have more than one competent person for the business?
Yeah, my view is yes. I think, and the reason I say that is because the competent person may not always be at the site at any one time. That person's going to go on holiday, have sick days, be on courses, conferences, and maybe not around the whole time. And certainly if the business is a 24/7 business or runs different shift patterns, and I know I do work with some companies that do that, they maybe need more than one. It could be that the particular person is asking the question could think about maybe a health and safety committee, maybe made up of 3 or 4 competent people. The only thing is somebody needs to take overall kind of charge, and my view of that would be a site safety manager and or a responsible person. But absolutely, to answer the question, to have more than one is great.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. And then another question, similar topic. Is it the owner or the competent person who is liable for accidents?
Both. So
Okay.
under the Health and Safety at Work Act, and the regulation number eludes me, I can get that out to everybody. It does talk about the responsible person and competent person, and anybody with I think the job titles are manager, director, senior officer, secretary of the business, could be prosecuted under the Health and Safety at Work Act if the health and safety regulations aren't brought into the workplace.
Right.
So,
Okay.
but the answer is both.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that clarity. And then somebody's asked or said that they've been asked to manage health and safety in the business, and they're asking, where do they start?
Good question, really good question, and I'm coming across this more and more, where maybe somebody that's joined the business doing a totally different role, they could be doing a clerical role, admin role, an ops role, has been asked, well, can you look after all the health and safety now, fire safety as well? It won't take you very long, just do a few risk assessments. I get that. However, my view would be, are they competent? Have they had the right training? Are they experienced? Have they got the qualifications? So I think the first thing they need to think about is, are they competent to do that? And absolutely, they should think about what training they could go on. The next point then would be thinking about the business itself, and depend on the complexity of that business, would then depend on whether they can or can't do that. And again, we could be talking about an office with 3 or 4 people, some desks, chairs, screens, admin type arrangement, but equally it could be nuclear plant, power plant, chemical power plant, construction, very, very different businesses. So they need to think about what tasks, activities and procedures they're running. I think the first port of call really is to think about training and what they should really be doing within that role.
Okay, thank you. And then a question that's COVID related.
Okay.
And so obviously the national lockdown is coming to an end. Do we need to revisit our risk assessments?
Yep. So everybody should have done a COVID risk assessment some months ago, and I would absolutely review what that is. One, because you may have not revisited that since you put it into place back in May, June, July, or whenever it was you did it. But secondly, it could be that workers are now changing what they're doing. They could be working from home. You may have changed procedures. So I'd absolutely update the risk assessment and just make sure you've got things in place. The sanitisation, the COVID secure stuff, the PPE. Are you allowing people back in the building? How many people are you allowing in the office or the warehouse? Are you running a split shift procedure? So absolutely go back and review that and just re-sign it off so that everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing.
Okay, thank you. And then our last question that's come in is whether a person responsible for health and safety appointed without having anything that is needed, and whether doing the role, will they get training and courses, etc. So can the person responsible be appointed without having anything that you've just said that's needed? So you talked about the training, etc.
I think that you can appoint somebody, but the view would have to be that you're going to then train them on to be competent. I think it's very unfair to appoint somebody and then expect them to manage a health and safety system, training, risk assessments, whatever it might be, without training them. It's not only bad practice, but it's also could land yourself in trouble, because they may make wrong decisions and not do things properly. So I think I'm hoping I'm answering the question, because I didn't quite understand it first time around. Is that absolutely you can appoint somebody, but please think about their journey over the first 3, 6, 9, 12 months as to what kind of support, training and guidance they're going to be given. Did that answer the question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So that's it for the questions. So that brings us to the end then, Dom. So, over to you for the last few remaining slides.
We've got a couple of webinars coming up. We've got a really great session coming up on the 10th of December, which is all around planning for the next year ahead, and it's more focused towards HR. The HR team are going to be delivering that one. And the next one I'm going to be delivering is a change from health and safety, but it's more focused on mental health for managers, and it's obviously a big time for mental health. We're in the middle of a pandemic, stroke the second lockdown. Mental health of people has been exacerbated. So we're going to talk about that on the 16th of December, which is a Wednesday. It's only a few weeks away. And again, if you want to get on board with any of those, please do that through the HR Solutions website. And there's a section there for upcoming webinars. Here's how we can help. We can look at safety compliance audits for you. on-site audit, and we run a number of different training courses, whether that be delegated and or online. We can be your competent person, and should you appoint us to work with you. And it's very much a partnership approach. You would actually get me as part of an extended part of your team, and we can look at health and safety committee meetings, looking at statements, documents, risk assessments, and the like. So documents and checklists, and we've just engaged. We've now got a digital health and safety platform stroke IT solution, which will help build a lot of this stuff, and it's, you know what, it's really, really great value. So please, if you'd like to get in touch, then do so. I also hold a free 30-minute call on a weekly basis with anybody that'd like to talk to me for 30 minutes, and I'm more than happy to share my details as well. We are running some further training events which are held at the Kettering Park Hotel in a COVID secure environment, and the two we've got left are next Monday, Mental Health First Aid Level 2 and Safeguarding Level 3 the following Monday. If you'd like to come on those, please let us know. We've got an Eventbrite page as part of our HR Solutions website. Equally, I will accept an email to book your space, and they're all nationally accredited awarding body courses, £99 per course, or if you want to do both, we price that at £180, and it includes everything: refreshments, lunch, parking, all the books and resources, the exam fee, certificate as well, and you get to spend the day with me, which is even better. We've got free HR health and safety risk and compliance audits that are available through our HR Solutions-UK.com website. So again, take about 15 minutes to complete, and are really, really good. You get an instant response, and you can look at where your organisation is from a Brexit perspective, GDPR, HR, and COVID. And again, just a link there to some of the courses that we're running. We're more than happy to come into your workplace and run those with your staff, and or they're available in delegated locations, of which two we just mentioned a few minutes ago. Please sign up to our newsletter. It's a really great resource. Not only do you get updates on industry guidance and the law, but there's different training events coming up on there. There's things on news, and we keep that up to date on anything that changes, whether it be from an HR or health, safety and environmental perspective. There's a link there, and again, please sign up for that. It is free, and that gets sent out on a weekly basis. And should you wish to contact me for any reason, that's my details there, Dominic G at hrsolutions-uk.com, and my phone number as well. More than happy to discuss anything about this presentation and or any of the others that you've been on. And if you've got any health, safety, environmental or training requirements, I'm more than happy to have a chat with anybody about that. Please contact me. It'd be great to hear from you. And I'm going to hand back to Victoria to talk to you about how the feedback piece works.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you for a brilliant webinar, Dom. So in terms of the feedback, then we're always keen to receive feedback from you as to how we can add content or do things differently for you. So there will be a short survey that will be sent out just to capture that feedback, and we would really appreciate it if you're able to take the time to complete that. And finally, it's just to say thank you to everybody that's joined us today, taking time out of a busy work schedule, no doubt. And of course, thank you for the information, Dom. It's been a really helpful, insightful webinar today. And so thank you for your time and helping us to understand what's needed with health and safety. Very informative. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
That's okay. So that brings us to the end of today's webinar. We really hope that you can join us in our webinars that we're running next month. So hope to see you then. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.